Hey everyone, just stepping in front of the camera for a quick second. Today's video we're going to test all of the sketchbooks that I have and see how granulating watercolors show up on different sketchbooks. Personally, I love the granulation of watercolors. To me, it's one of those things that make watercolors so special and magical to use. The less you touch them, the more, they do their thing. So I really wanted to know which ones would perform the best. For me, that is, the more granulation, the better. Obviously, it's a personal preference type of thing. I do want to mention that there are three major factors that contribute to, the end result. The paint you use, you want to use a paint that granulates. The amount of water you use, usually it really varies, but with lighter washes or more watery washes, the granulation will show up better than with very concentrated paint. And then the third one is the paper. The paper does make a huge difference. So I didn't know what to expect. I kind of had my suspicions, but I was definitely surprised by some of the results. Also, check out the description box for all the links, and I'll probably also write just my favorites there. If you're, if you just want the facts and you don't want to watch, you can read what I write there. Also, hi, if you're new here, my name is Rit. I do watercolor, art journaling, traveler's notebook, mixed media videos. There are new videos every single week, so I would love for you to join me, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when I'm posting new videos, and let's get to today's video. I'm going to start with all the watercolor paper journals that I have, and we'll see how they compare. So I'm thinking the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to use a classic like ultramarine blue, and then probably a color that has some interesting mixture, I don't know, maybe Moonglow or Cascade green, and then one of those super granulating colors like the Lunar paints from Daniel Smith. I'm going to do this off camera because I don't think it's that interesting to watch a gazillion times of doing the same thing, but I'll be back with the results, of course. And the results are in, so let's take a look. Now I want to say this is of course also dependent on application. I tried to kind of keep it similar, but it is possible that some of this is due to user error and not necessarily the combination of the pigment and the paper. So let's start with the Stillman Birn journals. The reason I like these sketchbooks is because they offer a huge variety of papers, sizes, bindings, soft cover, hardcover. You can kind of find, I think anyone can find their favorite there. And I have used several of them, so I wanted to see how they compare. And I think that it kind of confirmed my previous preferences. So let's take a quick look. This is the Zita Series, and this is really thick, cold pressed paper. These are beautiful, but I find the paper maybe just a little bit too fancy for a sketchbook. You can see that the paint granulates, I would say kind of okay. The one color that I used, Lunar Earth, this color is so granulating. You can use it, I think, with every paper and you will get granulation. But I think most of us tend to use other granulating paints like, ultramarine blue. I think that's a good standard color to test. And it does show the granulation, but it's not as intense as I would personally want. So the Zita Series is kind of okay, not the most amazing one. This is the Zita Series, and this one I don't like. It's a very smooth paper. It's really good if you like to do very accurate botanical illustrations, for example, with watercolors. It's super thick. It's as thick as the Beta series, but it's very smooth. Not my cup of tea at all, but if you had any preconceived notions that you won't see granulation on smooth paper, well, you can definitely see it. This is the Daniel Smith. The top one is always the Daniel Smith, then the Ultramarine blue, then we have White Nights Ultramarine, Lunar Earth, and then Moonglow, and I also added some Cascade green. So it does show some granulation. You will see it also on smooth paper. So if you really love smooth paper, I don't think this would keep you from using it, in my opinion. And the winner, and also the most beat up one, because I just have the one journal to test it on, this is the Alpha series. So this is also a slightly textured paper. It's not completely smooth, but it's not as heavyweight as the Beta series. And I really love it. You can see it buckles more. That's just the nature of thinner paper. But I found the journal really, really fun to use, and it's completely full, so I had to use a page that already had a little bit of stuff on it. But you can see also here, the granulation shows on this paper beautifully. I think from all three, the granulation of the Ultramarine blue is the most obvious here. Lunar Earth, of course, granulates, and then also we can see the beautiful granulation of Moonglow. And then Cascade green, I don't know, I think it's not showing as granulating as much as just the color kind of separates. It's very interesting. But yeah, from the three types of Stillman Birn sketchbooks that I have, the Alpha one is definitely my pick. For reasons mentioned before, just because I prefer the thinner paper. I find it less intimidating and more fun to play with. And also the granulation is lovely. So that's how those look. Now let's look at some other sketchbooks that I have. This one is the Honeymoon Lay sketchbook. There's no name here, no, just the rooster. That's their logo, I guess. And this one is, it looks like cold press. I haven't seen a ton of different variations of their sketchbook. Just this one paper. They have a ton of papers sold like in blocks and pads, but their watercolor sketchbooks, I've just seen this one paper. It is slightly textured, textured, which I like. And it is a little bit cream shade, which I don't mind. And the paint granulates beautifully on it. So these, as opposed to the Stillman Birn, are vegan. So if that's something that matters to you, these are a great option. And I think actually the paper here is, you know, a good weight for my personal preferences, textured, and the granulation shows beautifully. So I'm really happy that I have this option. And these are, if you're in Europe, I think these are easy to find. I know that in the two art stores that I have in my relatively small town, they have these. So I'm really happy that these show granulation because I love granulation. Now this is the little insert from Traveler's Notebook Company, their watercolor paper insert. This is rather smooth, so not as textured as the Honeymoon Lay, and it has a cream color. You can see that the granulation still shows really nicely here. I also painted some of these crazy sunflowers. You can see that on the last week's video, and you can see that it granulates beautifully. So if you're into the Traveler's Notebook system and you like also to paint with watercolors, I think these are lovely. I'm very pleasantly surprised by the quality of these inserts. And yeah, you can really see the granulation. Beautiful. Very, very nice. Let's move on to my Cuddy journals. These are, if you kind of like these kind of handmade, stitch-bound sketchbooks, then these are lovely, and I highly suggest checking them. Now, the problem I have here is that I'm not completely certain which paper this is. It seems kind of smooth because I have their rough paper, so I'm not sure if this is the hot pressed or the cold pressed. Whichever one it is, the paint shows really nicely on it, the granulation. I mean, you can see the ultramarine blue especially is quite granulating compared to other papers, and then Lunar Earth granulates on everything. And then we have Moonglow, you can see the beautiful separation, and Cascade green. So Cuddy journal, this one, this is the smaller size. Again, you can see here, beautiful. Works really, really well. I have also a ginormous journal sketchbook from theirs with rough paper. This one is for sure the rough paper. Yeah, it shows nicely. I wouldn't even say that it's more granulating than the other one. Let's try and take a closer look. Sorry, this is a little bit awkward to navigate also for me here. Well, just for me here, because you're sitting comfortably, hopefully, watching this. So, you know, the paper definitely adds something because the sediment in the paint can kind of sink in the little grooves of the paper. But in this case, even though this is much smoother than this, I don't know if the camera picks up. I think the camera picks up the granulation, the texture of this paper, because it is very textured. I can tell, for example, in Moonglow, with the rough paper, there's definitely more like separation and granulation. You can really see how the pigment sinks into the paper. So here it is quite obvious. I'll show it to you. I'll show you next to the smoother paper. So you can see it. But with the ultramarine, I'm not so sure. So yeah, I would say probably if you want maximum granulation, then, you know, use granulating pigments with, or paints with rough paper. But still you can find some smoother papers that work really, really well for those purposes. The rest of what I have, this one is a Moleskine watercolor sketchbook. I'm not a huge fan of the paper. I never really got into these, just my personal preference. You can see they are textured, these ones that I have. This one, it's really old, I've had it for years, and it does show the granulation really, really nicely. So also here you can see the White Nights Ultramarine Blue is really beautifully granulating, also with Moonglow. So if you do like the Moleskine journals, I don't know, maybe now I would feel differently about them, but I never really fell in love with them. But they are great for showing granulation, it seems. And then the one thing that I was just curious about was using the thinner paper. So this is the Stalogy notebook, and you can absolutely use watercolor also on different papers, but you know, you need to test it. So this type of paper, it doesn't really bleed through, and it doesn't, the water doesn't break apart the paper, which might happen with some papers. So definitely you want to test it out. But you can see it really crinkles the paper, which for many of us is a wonderful side effect because it gives you that crinkle. If you're a fan of the crinkle, you know what I'm talking about. But of course this is not watercolor paper, and I just wanted to show you that it does show the granulation beautifully. So let's take a closer look. We have the ultramarine, then we have I did a very light wash of the Lunar Earth. Look how beautiful Moonglow looks on this paper, and also the Cascade green. And then I had a sheet of paper. I'm not sure which paper they used. It does feel very similar to the Tamora River paper, but I don't know that for sure. This is a sheet of Tamora River paper, and you can see again the crinkle. This will happen just because it gets wet, but again, these don't bleed through. Maybe very slightly here because it's a more pigment, but you can see how beautiful the granulation shows on this. So this is just really fun paper to play with. I do enjoy playing with it, but yeah, it's not the classical watercolor paper. Okay, I think this is getting a bit too long, so I'm going to break it to 2 parts, and next week or the week after, I don't know, maybe I'll mix it up a bit, we will check out single sheets, like just paper that you can find in a pad and not in a sketchbook, and see how the granulation shows on them. So I hope you enjoyed. Give this video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments your favorite papers to use, if you like granulation, if you don't. I want to hear it all. I would love to know your opinion. Have a wonderful Saturday, weekend, week. I'll see you in another video soon. Bye.